all heroes will fall eventually. That is a fact that we know for certain. Whether or not that means that they die in the line of duty, or if they simply just age out of being a hero, or simply set the cowl down and never pick it up again. Eventually, the greatest heroes will fall, they will fail, and they will be replaced. And not even somebody as revered as Batman could escape the concept of aging. Eventually, the war that he wages on crime would take the most out of him. Sometime in the not too distant future, Batman is simply just too old to continue his fight against crime. He is losing out on Wayne Enterprises to a bunch of scum and villainy that writhes in Gotham. And he's slowly being unable to continue his work as Batman, despite how advanced the technology is, and despite how advanced the technology in his suit is, he can't escape the pitfalls of aging. And when he was trying to save a young woman who was being held hostage, Batman ended up having a heart attack. Age came for him finally and slowly. And unfortunately, Batman, in a desperate bid to survive, had to do the one thing he swore he never would. Batman had to pick up a gun, the symbol of everything he fights against, and he had to use that as his way of avoiding being killed himself. It goes against the very moral code that he has upheld throughout the last few decades and that he has trained years for. And what makes it all even worse is in Batman's pursuit to be this protector of Gotham. All of the years he spent, he has nothing to show for it. Gotham is still a cesspool in plenty of danger that needs saving, and Batman has no one left around him. He alienated Dick Grayson by not telling him about Barbara, and as a matter of fact, he lost his very first Robin. And while their relationship might have been mended temporarily in the future, Dick Grayson is nowhere to be found in this show at all. He's simply not around. And to make things even worse, Bruce's second Robin, Tim Drake, ended up being kidnapped by the Joker, tortured, and made into a smaller version of the Joker. This left Tim scarred for life, especially when he had to kill the Joker to save Batman. And of course, this left a bad taste in Barbara's mouth as well, one of the few allies Batman had left at this time. This was kind of the end of the Bat family for this Batman in the DC animated universe. He quite literally had nothing left after this event. It also doesn't help that he ended up getting Barbara pregnant and unfortunately led to her having an abortion due to the pregnancy being too stressful. And that leaves us with a pretty bleak future for Gotham. The youth are angry. They have no protector. Gotham is a cesspit of crime despite being so technologically advanced. It's just a cesspool of crime and villainy, and nobody seems to want to stand up to them. The people in power are corrupt. The government, the police, everyone that runs the city is corrupt on some level. And there are gangs running around imitating some of Batman's greatest villains, such as the Jokers. But not everyone wants to stand for this. And this is where we meet the protagonist of this brand new show, Batman Beyond. That would be Terry McGinnis. Now, Terry is far closer in temperament to Jason Todd when he was Robin, rather than Batman. Terry often fights simply out of pure anger and emotion. He doesn't do it out of some sort of self-righteousness, but he does believe in upholding the law and protecting others, even if the police won't do so. But he is also young, in love, and often prone to outbursts, especially against classmates that he simply doesn't like. He is often getting in fights at school and receiving almost near constant disciplinary actions. Now, you can definitely pin some of this anger on the fact that Terry comes from a broken household. His parents are not together, and the two do not seem to get along with one another, as Terry pretty much hasn't seen his mother since moving in with his father, and I think Terry resents his father partly for that.
You're not living with your mom.
Don't remind me!
That's your problem right there. You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you.
Terry has very little care for any sort of authority figures in his life. I believe he feels that authority figures have typically let him down, especially throughout a majority of his life. He doesn't have a lot of respect for his dad, even though he clearly does love his dad. He loves his mom, but seems estranged from her. And Terry, in all honesty, is just a difficult person in general. He is a hothead, for lack of better terms. I mean, dude actively attacks a group of jokers when they touch his girlfriend, Dana. Now, while most people obviously wouldn't want their girlfriend to be harassed by a gang of jokers who are known for doing absolutely terrible things, Terry goes far out of his way to fight off all of them, and as a matter of fact, to chase them away from the scene of the crime. Terry is a highly skilled combatant, despite knowing that he hasn't received very much combat training. And this is where Terry ends up crossing paths with Bruce Wayne. Terry ends up riding to the Wayne estates, trying to escape the gang of jokers. And we get one of the coolest Batman scenes ever. Bruce is like 70 in this scene, and he absolutely wipes the floor with a bunch of these Joker goons like they're absolutely nothing. And well, it was a really cool scene to see Batman back in action, the original Batman. It was extremely short-lived because Bruce is an old man who can barely function on his own without needing to take a bunch of medicine. And so Terry decides to help him inside as a thank you for saving his life, basically. But while Terry was in Bruce's mansion and was helping him, he ends up noticing the cardinal sign for Batman, or just about any Batman media, and that's a bat inside of the clock. And Terry would end up finding out that Bruce is Batman. Now, funnily enough, I think it's absolutely hilarious that it was so easy for him to get inside of what is the Batcave, but Bruce made it very clear that he hasn't been in the Batcave since he gave up. I wouldn't even be surprised if he didn't lock it. Bruce doesn't even have Alfred to help him do upkeep around the mansion anymore. And while Terry does find this out, Bruce is no slouch in basically telling him to get the hell out. And so, with Terry's party missed, a night full of misadventure, he decides to finally head home to his dad, only to find out that his entire house has been not only burgled into, not only defamed, but that his father is dead. And this is devastating for Terry. He quite literally abandoned his dad at the house by himself. At least that's how Terry feels about it. He can't eat, he can't sleep, and he is devastated. He puts it all on himself, believing that it is his fault that his father is dead, believing that if he had been there, he could have done something to help save his dad's life. And to make everything worse, the last impression Terry's dad would have had of him before he died is the argument they have, the explosive disrespect that Terry gave his father, and the blatant disregard he had for him in the moment. And I think that eats at Terry the most.
No.
Yes! I'm not afraid of those guys. We could have fought them off, me and Dad. We could have fought. I yelled at him, Mom. He grounded me and I wouldn't listen.
And it's in Terry's unfortunate grief and also cleaning up of the place that he once lived that he finds one of the most important things in his entire life. It's a data disk that holds a bunch of information on a deadly virus that Derek Powers has been working on in order to make a significant profit. Now, I do want to point out and make it known that Terry's dad truly loved him. He put the most important information of his life inside of a photo of him and his son. So clearly Terry was important to him. But Terry decides that the police aren't going to deal with this, and there's only one man that could, and that's Batman. And so he goes to Bruce looking for help. Now that is, for all intents and purposes, the end of the first episode of this show. But I want to take a moment and just take a break in order to talk about the show in its entirety, aesthetics-wise. as especially when I was a younger child, this show had me in a chokehold with the way it looked. Now looking back on it, it definitely looks like what 1999 thought the future would be. Lots of flying cars, lots of different types of automobiles, a lot of angular designs, very bright and colorful, almost dystopian cyberpunk vibes, and I personally really like the look of it. I especially like the fact that there are still cars that drive on tires, but the rich and ultra elite have flying cars. It's just a little distinction that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the color palette of the show especially, as it made Gotham stand out and look unique in its own right, especially from what people consider the most definitive interpretation of Gotham being in Batman the Animated Series and the New Adventures. And just another thing I love about this show is its opening sequence crawl. It just screams cyberpunk, one of my favorite sort of looks for TV shows, movies, video games, etc. And overall, I just really enjoyed it, and I wanted to make that known, especially with this first video about Batman Beyond. And with that brief intermission over, it's time to get back to Terry in the second of this two-parter opening for this series. Terry does end up bringing the data disk to Bruce Wayne, and Bruce doesn't really want to do anything other than hand it off to the police. He basically wants to give the disk to Barbara Gordon, one of his police contacts, and that's all he wants to do. And Terry is extremely frustrated by this. He has grown up hearing the legends of the Batman. The Gotham still knows and remembers Batman, but he doesn't see that in Bruce.
Something happened to you, didn't it? And it wasn't just that you got old.
And Terry is extremely frustrated by this. He is often seen lashing out when he's frustrated, and he lashed out at Bruce in that moment. Now, to make things even worse, Powers knows that Terry has the data disk, and Powers desperately wants it back. And so he ends up using one of his goons to string up Terry and essentially get the power disk off of him, with Terry narrowly escaping with his life. But Powers received what he wanted anyways, which was the data on the disk, a way for him to mass produce this deadly toxin that will, for all intents and purposes, be used as a bargaining chip for Powers to seal a major deal, once again making Bruce Wayne's old company look horrendous, since Bruce has little to no say. And to make things even worse for Bruce, Ace was tied up outside, only to alert him to the fact that the Batman Beyond suit is missing in its entirety. Now, of course, there's only one person who could have taken it, that being Terry. He wants to put a stop to Derek Powers' plot, and in doing so, he ended up stealing the Batman Beyond suit. All to use to spy on Derek Powers and potentially get the data back, which has some really cool tech in the suit. I always love the two fingertip listening devices, but that's just me.
This is what he looked like the next day. 2 hours later. An hour after that.
There is no cure?
Extreme heat or radiation, but
And not only did Terry find out exactly what Powers planned to do with the data, and as a matter of fact, he ended up finding out that Powers' right-hand man was responsible for killing his own father. Terry's dad was killed not in an act of randomness or revenge by the Jokers, but in an act of revenge by his own boss, because his father was going to be a whistleblower on a potentially deadly compound. Oh, and to make everything just slightly worse, Terry also ends up getting caught by the security guards and not only has to flee, but also has to deal with the fact that Bruce Wayne has gotten wise to the fact that Terry not only has stolen the suit, but also Bruce has made a countermeasure in case the suit was ever taken, because that man is more paranoid than anyone else on the planet, and sometimes justifiably so. And he ends up deciding to shut off Terry's suit in the middle of him fighting armed guards, just to teach him a lesson for stealing the suit. And on Bruce's behalf, it's just really just a terrible move. I mean, you knew the dude was in danger already, but then again, Terry's fault for stealing technology from Batman. I mean, what else could you genuinely expect? But Bruce isn't heartless, at least to his core, because when he hears that Terry might potentially die, he does reinstate the suit. And Bruce fully intends to only give Terry just enough time for him to get out of danger and return to the Batcave. But Terry wants revenge. He wants vengeance on the man who murdered his father. And so he begs Bruce to please allow him to go deal with the man who not only killed his father and distributed a deadly virus. Terry begs for this to be the case, for Bruce to let him go. And Bruce, of course, lets him, because Bruce knows what it's like to not get vengeance on the killer who took everything from you. And Terry plays on those heartstrings.
And this time, it'll be for good.
I read up on you, Mr. Wayne. I know how you lost your folks. The guy who murdered my dad is on that transport. This is my one chance to nail him.
If not anything, Terry is very intelligent. He knew the second he preyed on Bruce's emotional attachment to never receiving the gratification of snatching up his parents' killers, Bruce would allow him to do exactly what he wanted to do. And so Terry was finally able and allowed to go stop Powers from distributing these chemicals, and in the process, Terry doused him with lethal chemicals, kind of on accident. But regardless, the next thing Terry does is 100% not an accident. And this is how you know you're dealing with a very different Batman than the traditional one we got in the DC animated universe. When he gets onto that ship and he finds out that the man who killed his father is about to basically 1v1 him, Terry does not pull any sort of punches, even though he was pretty much getting his ass beat a majority of the time. But in the end, Terry was able to basically disengage the plane's autopilot systems, and in the end, he was able to drown the man who killed his father, pulling a real Batman Begins, I'm not gonna officially kill you, but I won't save you. This really does characterize Terry as his own Batman. He really does set himself apart from both Bruce Wayne's interpretation of Batman and even Dick Grayson's interpretation of Batman. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, Bruce came to Terry's house and offered him a job. One that might not pay the best, it might not always have the greatest perks, but it's gotta be one of the coolest jobs you could probably have.
Go for this, go for that. An ally, as it were. Would you be interested?
Well, of course.
And that's how the Batman died. And a new, younger, newer Batman was born. I grew up watching Batman Beyond mostly through reruns on something that I don't even know if this channel exists anymore. It was called Boomerang, and I used to watch the show a lot via that, and I owned the DVDs growing up. I have a real soft spot for this show, and I really love it, and I want to cover it more on my channel. But I wanted to give the first two-parter a really good look from the perspective of both Batman and Terry himself. I just want to take a moment to thank you all so much for watching all the way to the end. If you liked the video, please leave me a like. It helps the channel out a lot. If you want to subscribe, it's free and you can always unsubscribe later. If you dislike the video, please dislike the video and leave a comment down below. I believe constructive criticism is the best way that I can learn to be a better content creator, and I don't know unless you guys tell me. So please let me know. Finally, I do run a Patreon in which you can see all of these videos completely unedited and early, all for $1 a month. And as well, I do offer a $5 tier in which I shout out my Patreons. And so it's about that time of the video where I get to shout out Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. Those guys are amazing. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day, and thank you all for watching once again.